So that's what I'm saying. The text is like an object. It's gonna change perspective based on where you're standing. I don't know.
Hello?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I missed you, baby sweet. It was a day.
It was a day.
Please tell me you're seeing this too.
From Seattle, we're Drinking the Movies. I'm Taylor Baker.
And I'm Michael Clausen. That's nice.
Is this all spruced up winter ale, Hellbent?
It is very sprucey. It's a little denser than some of our last few beers.
But how is it?
It's delicious. That's what it is. What do you think?
I agree. I concur.
Wise words.
So we are going to do some first impressions on 2 genre pictures coming out this month and then early 2019. But before that, I was going to update the listeners on some titles we've done first impressions for that got pushed back.
What do we got?
We have Serenity, which was supposed to come out this year. Matthew McConaughey, Anne Hathaway picture. I think Diane Lane might have been in it too, and Jimin Hunsu. Mm-hmm. Now it's coming out in January 2019. I think it's January 19th, 2019, if I remember off the top of my head correctly.
Not too much longer there.
And then we recently talked about Her Smell, a little Elizabeth Moss picture, also pushed back to March 2019.
Additionally, High Life, the new Claire Denis movie, has been pushed to Q1 2019. And lastly, Under the Silver Lake has been pushed to April 2019.
Fingers crossed that it actually comes out then, right?
Correct. This is the second time it's been delayed, correct?
Mm-hmm. And then I have 2 indefinite possible delays that I should mention. In Fabric has 0 non-festival release dates currently.
All right.
Nothing is scheduled. Like, they don't even have a possibility of when it would come out, which is quite worrying. It might remain on the festival circuit until it picks up distribution.
Yeah.
And then the Life and Art, or the Art and Life, whatever that title is, the Pauline Kael documentary.
Oh, right.
Has absolutely 0 news. And it appears to still be receiving Indiegogo funding.
Oh, wow.
So, and documentary.org is still allowing donations for the documentary.
Wow.
So I don't know what that means, because people have watched it, but it's still receiving money for production. So, hard to say.
So our listeners can literally go fund this movie.
They
if
can.
They're interested.
They can. They could.
While researching, did you see if any of these were for good reasons or bad reasons, or I'll just see the dates were
Under the
pushed?
Silver Lake is being pushed for, according to A24, a good reason. They want to launch it in an open window. I think April 19th is about 10 days before Avengers 2 comes out. And it should be about a month after Captain Marvel.
Got it.
So it should be after Shazam as well. So like all the titles that would normally entice a teenager to go watch might be out of theaters or already watched by then. So all the teen viewers that I think they're counting on with this release will actually come watch.
Got it. Makes sense.
High Life, just a choice.
Probably just too busy of a fall.
Too flooded.
Yeah.
And I think that Claire Denis is working on that new picture, so maybe they want to release them closer together so that Claire is kind of building up a repertoire. I think that they acquired both her films.
Got it. Cool.
This distribution company. Her Smell, not a clue.
Yeah.
Probably just a money choice.
Yeah, I think that happened this year with Golden Exits. Like, it got released in January.
Yeah.
So, similar deal.
And then Serenity, that's tough.
I really thought that...
I think it means that they don't think they can get an award.
That's what I thought. Yeah, I thought for sure it would be up for performances, right?
Yeah, like at least release it in 2 cities like they did with Hostiles last year on December 31st.
Yeah.
But
who knows?
I guess they're not that confident. I don't know. I thought sound design was a real possibility.
Climax? Have you seen a date for that yet?
Climax is 100% off the books.
Oh, wow.
Now. 0 announcements, 0 news. I think it's playing in Spain. But, you know, that's where he lives, so
yeah,
tough.
Yeah. We'll wait.
So should we watch this Netflix Sandra Bullock genre trailer?
Let's do it. Bird Box.
Bird Box.
What's going on?
People describe seeing an entity that takes on the form of your worst fears.
Oh my god.
What are you looking at? What did you see? What is wrong with you? Please stop it!
We can't stay here.
Every contact we have had with the outside has brought us death.
Your kids, they deserve hope.
Every single decision I have made has been for them.
They're gone.
All right, Michael. We just watched the trailer for Suzanne Byers' Bird Box, starring Sandra Bullock.
Yes, we did.
What do you think?
I am cautiously optimistic. As we just mentioned off air, I've only seen one of Suzanne's previous works, The Night Manager, which you saw as well, right?
Loved it.
Yeah, I liked it too. I think, if I remember correctly, it's been a while. I remember it. I seem to remember it fondly.
It was shot well, but I think that its strength is plot mechanics and screenplay, which is, the story it's based on.
Yeah.
Not necessarily her direction.
Yeah, exactly. It maybe looks just a tad gimmicky to me. But that can sometimes be just what you need to, stage some cool set pieces.
Did you see Cargo?
Cargo? No, I don't know that
Freeman zombie picture set in Australia.
I like what you're saying, but
Came out this year. Some people liked it.
Yeah.
I hated it.
Okay.
I'm kind of worried that this might be like that.
Got it.
Where the outside of the fence is supposed to be really scary, but you're showing me very staged violence situations. I don't know if you remember that first scene in the street where there's all these people running in car crashes.
Yeah.
But that just screamed staged to me.
Definitely.
Instead of like... there's certain films where that doesn't feel that way, like Children of Men's opening terrorist sequence.
Definitely.
That feels more real. Yeah. And I am worried that this will feel very machinated.
I agree. The trailer feels a little...
It does.
You feel the artifice, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm a little worried about Trevante Rhodes to go from The Predator to something like this. I'm not sure why he's leaning in to this kind of fare necessarily after
money.
Well, yeah, that's actually a great reason to do it.
Yeah, that's normally why actors do what they do.
That's a great question.
This is quite the cast, though.
It is. Sarah Paulson, love Sarah Paulson.
John Malkovich, love John Malkovich.
Yeah, God, what has he been in recently?
Alita Battle Angel herself, Rosa Salazar.
Oh, was she in the trailer?
Uh-huh.
Was she a daughter?
No, just a side character.
Got it.
She probably dies pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So I guess instead of talking about all these things, what do you think this is about?
So I get the sense you threw out the word bird flu.
Yeah.
I do get the sense that perhaps, I don't know, it kind of looks like an epidemic, but then they're talking about creatures, right?
Yeah, but they're... Yeah, good point.
I don't know. I'm literally... I'm a little confused between those two.
They talk about hallucinations of your worst fear, and they show Sarah Paulson's eyes get all messed up.
Yeah.
And then it ends with Sandra Bullock being attacked in a boat while she's pointing a gun blindfolded.
Mm-hmm.
So, I
unclear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm worried that this movie tried to put a hat on a hat instead of just being good.
Right.
She had previously directed Serena, which by all rights should have been a good movie. Jennifer Lawrence, Bradley Cooper, perhaps what the early 2000s will be remembered for is this acting duo's great, fantastic works.
Yeah.
But she managed to mess that up. And I'm worried she might manage to mess up all these stars as well. I was a lot more excited by the cover than I am from this trailer, to be honest.
I would agree. I have been very intrigued, and this was maybe just a slight letdown, but still interested just to see what it... Yeah, and we only have a couple weeks to wait, so...
Yeah, and listeners too. Everywhere worldwide, 21st.
I like it.
Stay up late.
Sweet.
Now let's get to something I'm a little bit more excited for. The trailer for Captive State with John Goodman.
Let's do it.
Unemployment is the lowest in history. Poverty has been eradicated. Crime is non-existent.
All right, we just watched the trailer for Captive State, starring John Goodman and Vera Farmiga, it looks like. Mm-hmm. What'd you think, Taylor?
I am very excited for this genre picture. This is a much better made genre picture by the looks of it, even though we're only seeing bits of footage that are complete, loosely cut together with white dialogue kind of giving us the implication. It appears that aliens have taken over Earth and are using an artificial intelligence system to control things on the street level. It reminds me of it loosely reminds me of a Dave Bautista picture I watched earlier this year, in which they battle in some suburb of New York. I can't remember exactly what the title is, but it's named for that city.
Gotcha.
In which, like, you don't expect a war could break out, or like slavery could exist, or like racism could happen, but all these things are happening, and that appears to be what this is, where there's women being carried away by their collars, looking behind them at people getting murdered, while the AI is telling us to give thanks.
Yeah. And also just a better trailer. I think this did a better job of piquing my interest, whereas the other one, I think I saw kind of exactly what we're getting into. Haven't seen John Goodman in anything in a while. Excited to see him do just a straight genre picture like this. Isn't that another kid from Moonlight? Isn't that the middle-aged?
I was thinking the same thing, but I don't know his name, so
I was like,
trying
did you
to bring it up.
Deliberately choose these?
We
have a Moonlight.
I did. I am a genius. I am a savant, and I take all credit for any accidents that ever happen.
Well chosen.
That are good accidents.
Very well chosen. Yeah, I'm very intrigued. Do you know if it has an R rating?
No, it has not been submitted to the MPAA. It has not completed shooting.
Yeah, because we just got a couple glimpses of what looks like could be some pretty gruesome fare. So I am curious to see just how hard they lean into that and what exactly is occurring in those scenes. Those were nicely sort of ambiguous in what exactly was going on, but I was a little chilled nonetheless.
Do you think John Goodman is a human or a host for an alien?
Well, actually, after what you said, I think that's a great insight. He does look like a host to me, perhaps. So I think that's probably spot on.
Yeah, I was thinking Men in Black.
Yeah, exactly. Not too far off.
Not at all.
I'm excited. This will be a good one to see in the theater.
Oh, yeah. This is why A-List was made.
Yes, exactly.
Well, without further ado, shall we shirk this title and get into Shirkers?
Let's do it.
When I was 18, the thing I wanted more than anything was to make a movie. I had the idea that you found freedom by building worlds inside your head. That you had to go backwards in order to go forwards. But I never imagined it would end this way.
All right. We are talking about the Netflix original documentary, Shirkers. Directed by Sandy Tan,
correct.
If I remember correctly.
Well, wasn't it directed by George?
Aha. Let's dig in. I like this movie. You
did not like this movie.
All right. Cool.
I don't mean that to come off scathing or like reductive. I would be very interested in probably at least admire, if not love, the original film that this documentary is made about.
Yep.
It falls into that documentary trap that we opened with all of those months ago on Three Identical Strangers, in which the way that the interview style of the person who's maybe the star of the documentary is not something I appreciate. That's it. You know, like, it's really all at her feet. I don't think it's a bad documentary. I just do not enjoy this type.
Yeah, you say the interviewer. Do you mean you don't like her as a narrator or the people she's interviewing? Like,
I mean, I don't like when she's she's answering her own questions.
Gotcha.
Or when she's reflecting without any consideration for responsibility.
Oh, say more.
She basically never admits that she could be culpable at all. She never self-reflects and regrets. The way that she's always reflecting is as a victim, which I don't really... I mean, I get feeling like a victim in that moment and that she was a victim.
Yeah.
But I think that as an adult, in retrospect, instead of feeling like a victim, you should notice where you could have done something correctly instead of just continuing to orate how you were the victim of circumstance and people.
What was it you thought she should do differently?
Just the way that she inserted dialogue.
Yeah.
Or the way that dialogue was inserted. I don't know who edited this. Was so like all of her friends were criticizing her but also admiring her. But she was only making herself seem innocent and a victim. And that contrast, I don't necessarily know exactly how you would make it different because I'm so far away from the film. I think I watched it a week and a half ago now, so I don't remember exactly, but I remember like she would cut in and there were good moments where she would cut in, specifically when she's with the wife who still, or the ex-wife who requests, or the widow who requests to have her face blocked, and she's talking about what it's like to be on this trip.
Yeah.
That was good first person. That was good first person. The preceding stuff in which she's going over the process and you're hearing her friends talk about how Sandy was being kind of a bitch.
Yeah.
And she's just acting like she's a victim the whole time and not responsible for what seems like it could have been a great movie and also responsible for what happens in so much as she is responsible for not following through on that stuff, even though she didn't know she needed to. As an adult, you should know. As a critic, you should know what you did wrong. And as
with her friends, you mean?
No, with the project. How she lost the project to George. I think as a film critic, if she's been criticizing film for over a decade, 2 decades, she should be able to bring some insight to the viewer about what she could have done differently. So that this isn't just a woe is me, this is a woe is me, don't do this. Here's how to not do this. Maybe, is how I would have enjoyed it more.
Got it.
But that's just my bias. It's not necessarily bad. I just didn't like it.
Yeah.
I don't like that woe is me stuff.
So I think I partially agree. I think there were 2 problems that held me back from loving it, even though I did like it quite a bit. One was that even though she kind of alludes to the fact that she has since become aware of how she maybe treated her friends over the course of making the film kind of crappy, and her friends say, like, yeah, you were kind of an asshole. I don't think she ever really, like, turns the camera on herself and is ever really... I don't think she ever really owns that. She sort of lightly admits it, but I don't know that she ever really turns this into an apology, which I think would have been sort of just a satisfying gesture to those people who say, look, this was kind of terrible for us. Like, we did not have fun making this. Well, I mean, some of them say that, but they say you were kind of, crappy to us during this process. I don't know that she ever really owns that part of the process. Additionally, I think she builds up a little bit too much mystery around George in light of what she ultimately found out about him, which I think was a little less than satisfying, which is fine. Like, I don't know that that's really any fault of her own. Like, the fact that he took it and we don't really have a great answer for why. That's not really her fault, but, you make a documentary, you own whatever sort of resolution you give the audience.
I'd even push back. I feel like we know why. Like, he's a broken person. He doesn't know how to... He doesn't want to fail, but he also wants to never... He wants to be remembered as a success who was attached to important projects.
Yeah.
But he never wants to put himself in a situation to fail, it seems.
Yeah.
So by making it and keeping it in all of its glory, it still is this glorious idea, but you never have to receive the criticism for it.
Right. Completely agree. I guess I was maybe expecting, because of how that mysterious tone was sort of building my expectations for there to be a bit more of like an oh my gosh moment, when it's more just like, oh, okay, he just was an insecure dude.
Yeah.
And a little bit of a weirdo.
Yep.
And he just wanted to take these things from these people because he was insecure. That doesn't really provide like a ton of relief from this tension that I think she did. I thought she handled pretty well. But I guess I would disagree on the victim part. Like, I guess I felt like she was a victim of theft. I thought for me she did.
No, I agree that is true.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a useful way of portraying the story, though. She's a critic. She has been for 2 decades, right?
Yeah.
Keeping that in mind, do you think that that's a good movie for someone who knows what movies should be like for 20 years?
Totally. I thought...
I disagree. That's maybe the crux of it. Like, I feel like someone should have made something more tight. I feel like it was too loose.
I mean, I thought the craft was delightful. I mean, delightful is not the right word. I overuse that word.
When you say the craft, do you mean the footage of the original film, or do you mean the documentary footage?
Both.
Okay.
As I said that, I was referring to the documentary, but I think the footage of Shirkers, the fictional feature, also looks fascinating.
It does.
But I think the documentary is crafted in such a way to involve me in what this process felt like for her. So I would agree, like, the tone of the narration does express sort of devastation, but I think she just involved me in the process that way. She showed me what movies meant to her, how excited she was as a result to make her own, and then have that taken away. I was like, God, that just sounds like terrible. That sounds awful.
I absolutely agree, but I feel like all that emotion happened in the first 30 minutes, and it continued for quite some time after that.
Yeah.
And that's maybe where I separate. Like, I follow that emotional journey, and I was like, for the first 30 minutes, I was like, this is really good.
Yeah.
And then it was just her talking about what happened to her. And not so much that it also happened to her friends. Or that she's glad that he didn't hurt anyone else after her. Like, she just kind of always remains focused on herself in this really myopic way that I just personally find distasteful.
I agree. I mean, that is kind of interesting how in the process of making this documentary, she learns from her friends that she was a little selfish in the making of that movie. Similarly, she is a little self-centered in the making of this documentary. I would agree. She is interviewing them, but it does feel like it is her movie, and you kind of wonder, like, why isn't this sort of a collective effort? I guess you could argue that she's the director of this documentary. She's the one who made it, so she gets to tell it from her perspective. But I do wish that she was just maybe a little more... she just owned more wholeheartedly how she treated them when they were very clear about it not being terribly fun.
I completely agree, and I think that what you said best says what I don't know how to say, which is she's the director of this documentary. She's wholly responsible of this documentary, and within it, she didn't take any responsibility for her previous project. And that's, some people don't mind. I just mind that. Like,
what do you mean? The guy just jacked it from her. He took it. What was she supposed to do?
Well, she could have followed up.
I think she did. Like, I don't remember if she, like, you mean like she just should have followed him more? I think he just took off. Like, I don't remember the specifics, but wasn't the idea he just disappeared?
Yeah, so the thing to me is, like, if you love this movie that you made and he took it, how do you not do more to get it? If it meant that much to you, how do you not do more to go get it? If you spent your life savings on it, how do you not just fly over there? You know that he has a wife. Go get in contact with her. You know her name. Figure it out. I can't imagine loving something enough to make a documentary about it, but not enough to, chase it down when you know who could possibly know something.
Yeah.
Instead of just making phone calls when you know that he won't talk on the phone.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't remember the specifics of his separation. I guess I just got the sense that she was the kid in the situation. She was a teenager, and she trusted him. He was the mentor.
But she's an adult now, and she's been criticizing film for a long time.
But she's talking about the experience of her as a kid. She got her movie jacked. She doesn't know where he went. I don't know, like, if I lived in Singapore and I was an 18-year-old kid and some American took my film, the reels, and then flew to America, I don't know how I would track him down.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but I just disagree.
That's fair.
I think that when you love something, you go after it. And she seemed to really love this project.
Yeah.
So my criticism is just that she didn't love it enough to go after it soon enough, damn it.
Yeah.
I would love to have watched this movie. I thought it was interesting that she drew a correlation to Ghost World. Because I did feel Ghost World during the scenes before that she does that alliteration bit where she's comparing films that she thinks are comparable to it. She grabbed a Wes Anderson film. I don't remember which one. Maybe it was Rushmore.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And it was just kind of comparing this indie boom that happened in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And, you know, I definitely see some quality there. I feel like I would give the movie that she made a 3.5. I just didn't quite enjoy the documentary style.
Yeah. Oh, style. Even like the
voiceover style.
The voiceover. Yeah.
I thought it was very pleasing to look at as a documentary.
Yeah.
I would criticize its structure. I think that you would introduce the friends of George quite a bit sooner. Not have them say much, but have them say that they had a similar experience to what she had. Leave that as a hanging fruit or a carrot in front of me so that I'm continuing to watch with these ideas in mind instead of just painting George into this weird character.
Yeah, it's funny. This is the same difference we had with Three Identical Strangers. You're right, because to me, again, like I felt like I was experiencing this journey as she experienced it. Like at the start of the movie, she's a teenager. I'm learning about her cinephilia, which leads to her wanting to make a movie, and eventually getting it taken away, and then embarking on this journey as an adult to figure out what the hell happened. But you want to know the ending first, so you know.
No, I don't want to know the ending. I want to know that there is this corollary track that we're going to follow to the end for her. And instead of saving all the George meat for the very end of it, I think you start and you say, like, this character you're watching, George, this character you're hearing about that's taking these weird car rides with a teenage girl who's underage and trying to put the moves on her, is a weird guy in more than this context. And here's a brief snippet of that interview with the fellow who worked on Sex, Lies, and Videotape. I don't know if you remember, but he basically says, like, I had the same experience as Sandy.
Yeah.
So if you take that part and you put it somewhere in the first 30 minutes, then I think it's just more interesting to watch George with that in mind.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, I think she lured me in nonetheless, but I could see that approach working. To me, it's just different, I guess. And the craft itself was exciting enough for me to just enjoy the experience, despite some of those other reservations. You know, to me, it had sort of a scrappy kind of collage-like aesthetic.
I think it did in the beginning.
Yeah.
I have the same criticism second half. I think the second half, a lot of the strengths in the beginning faded.
Yeah. I would agree. As you get more up to her investigation, to me, that's where it's harder to apply the craft in a really interesting fashion when the narrative kind of sputters because her discoveries are just only so interesting.
Yeah. We already know what she discovered. We've seen.
Yeah. She finds some solace in meeting this guy who had something similar, like you said. But I don't know that was the just, moment of relief or discovery that would really just tell me that I need to go tell everyone I know
what broke
to
your
watch
heart
this.
the most?
I don't know, probably right around the time she's describing waiting, just expecting contact from George. I mean, I can think about, this is such a silly analogy, just the feeling when you have something valuable, like, the only thing coming to mind right now is, like, your wallet, and you're like, oh my god, like, did I lose my wallet? That just the feeling in your stomach that when that kind of drops,
when you
I could see that
your keys
building.
are on your belt loop and you're checking your coat pockets.
Yeah, I think for me, she had done enough of a job to show me what movies meant to her, to involve me in that process and that sort of panic of being like, oh my god, like, I don't know that he's going to reach out to me. Like, I don't know what happened. That was pretty devastating. But I would agree. That's kind of the midpoint. And then half 2 is investigation. Not as exciting.
Which I think that if you introduce the prospect of investigation sooner, maybe that second half has more weight to it. But almost the way it was constructed, the first half, when it comes to an end, you feel like it's over. And then the documentary continues. And that might be part of my criticism. Just she didn't get it structured and give it the best opportunity to have its full runtime have weight.
Yeah.
It's just, we just watched The Love Me When I'm Dead a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of my negativity might stem from seeing something like this done so much better. And I just can't help that. Like, I can't remove that from my brain to try to get more objective on this one. I thought about trying to, and I just don't know how. I'd already fully processed it so much that there's just a lot of negativity in this title when I think about it, which isn't
it's not
fair.
sitting well.
And I think that it's really sad that she lost her movie, and I really would love to see it. I think that it's I also think it's really stupid that she chose to make a documentary about this instead of spending the money on redubbing the picture. That was one thing that kept running through my head, like, you have how much money to make this documentary? And you're not just going to take all the footage and get the sounds for it, re-record everything? If you have a good movie that just needs sound, get the sound.
Yeah.
That's just a little bit selfish on my part. I just want to watch the movie.
It's hard to not want to watch that movie.
Right?
It does look great. I would agree. You kind of wonder if she got involved in this process of making the documentary hoping for a better resolution than she ultimately found. And then decided...
It's possible.
I've made the documentary. But I agree.
I
You'd wonder what sort of possibilities she had to actually release it.
Yeah.
When she had it.
Did you get the sense that she'd already shot the back half before she'd recorded the first half audio? Like, she'd already shot
of the documentary,
the investigation before she recorded the first part of the documentary.
I hadn't thought about that. In hindsight, I think that's possible if it was shot kind of out of order.
I think that might be one of the things that bothered me intangibly. That I didn't feel like I was actually going on the journey. I felt like she took it and then was giving me her perspective on what she wanted me to take away from her journey. Whereas I would have rather gone on the journey.
Yeah. I don't know how you would get, like, at least it's chronological though, right? It starts with her as a teenager. Like, that's linear, right?
But we're still hearing everyone's voice interviews interjected within that timeline.
Right.
And I think that it is extremely likely that all of that was done after she'd conducted the investigation.
Yeah, probably.
And maybe that just added a feeling of inauthenticity
to
it, where I just
that.
Maybe couldn't buy in that I was on the journey with her. Like, there was something intangible that I can't really put my finger on that made me feel like she was showing me what she wanted to show me, and that I wasn't really going on an investigation with her. Like, I wasn't going to see the things she didn't want me to see, you know?
Oh, I could see that. Yeah, I felt like that anytime somebody talked about how their experience was less than ideal, and I was waiting for more of a response from her. And I thought, this seems a little guarded. I wish she had sort of let her guard down just a little bit more. So I could see that. That makes sense.
I mean, tell me more about Shirkers, why it's good.
Well, I think up until that point that we really do shift into investigation mode, I thought it did a great job of just involving me in her love of movies. I thought the references were really seamlessly integrated. I thought I got a sense for what the tone of Shirkers, the fictional feature, would be like because of the style she applied to the documentary. I thought the score was great. The oohs and the ahs. I thought that was atmospheric, and that added to kind of this surreal, mysterious tone to the documentary, which is ironic. Like, that's what was going to go in the inner feature. I thought that was very nicely handled. And I thought, there's a good mix of footage from the documentary along with footage of those references, the animation. I thought that was all really nicely put together. That convinced me of just how much she loved movies and how much this meant to her. This really hinges on whether or not you believe that she wanted this really badly. And I think she got me there through the craft.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. I just...
That's cool.
Yeah. I wish that I could see it that way, is how
Yeah.
I'd put it. That's all very valid and very true, I imagine.
Yeah.
It's just... Why couldn't she have made another feature?
Yeah.
Why couldn't she have audio dubbed that feature?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just feel like there's something that I can't put my finger on that's insincere about this documentary.
Ooh, interesting. Yeah.
And it might just be that she doesn't formally apologize to her friends. Could be that simple. I don't really know, but something just feels insincere about it to me.
I agree. And, I gave this... What'd you give it? 2?
Yeah.
Yeah. I gave it a 3.5. So to me, I kind of think of 3.5s as, like, solid, but they're also C's. Like, they're average. Like, to me, that's kind of how I think about it. They can be if we're getting into our, 0 to 100 scales.
I think you gave the other side of... Or you gave the Love Me When I'm Dead 3.5 as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd probably... they're probably pretty close.
And that's where I'd, really go, are you kidding me? One documentary is much more abrasive in non... it's not holding, the subject's hand in trying to make things better or portray some sort of superficiality onto it. Orson Welles is being criticized, and it just so happens that he also made great films.
Yeah.
And what happens in Shirkers is she may have made a great film, but she doesn't take any of the onus. So for me, it just kind of it separates there. And for me, if I was you, I would project that I'd be a 3 on Shirkers and a 3.5 on The Love Me When I'm Dead.
Well, yeah. It's easy to compare them, but at the same time, The Love Me When I'm Dead still just feels too much like a bonus feature to The Other Side of the Wind. So it's hard to really compare them. I feel like I got a story in itself from Shirkers. So the analogy isn't I can't quite get that right in my head.
You're firing right back at me, and I'm like, no, you're right. It's my favorite extra feature. It's a perfect extra feature.
Yeah. They're both pretty close. I liked them both.
I'm
just
going
generally
against...
speaking, I liked them both.
Yeah. I go against the grain on these types of documentaries, so I don't trust me. Watch it on Netflix.
Yeah.
And I hope that it performs well enough that they decide to attempt to do an audio dub.
That'd be great.
Of her original title, even if it's abbreviated and you have to interject title cards to tell me like what's happening or what would actually be the sound going. I would be very interested to watch someone attempt to put the footage together.
Yeah.
Without the sound, I'm much more interested in that artistic attempt than what happened.
Yeah.
I'd rather see the picture.
I agree. Looks dope.
It did look dope.
Sandy Tan, go make that movie. Cheers.
My wife had to go for a 2-week vacation, so I just took carrots and ate them. Diet food.
I never eat carrots that was that good before.
2 bedrooms. Think it worked?
They ate them all. Yeah.
Well, not diet food, but I drink a lot of beer to help wash it down.
Oh, okay. All right, I couldn't figure out. I was saying, I don't think it worked.
This documentary, I liked a little bit better.
All right.
A little bit better.
Moving in the right direction.
We're going to the mid of the country, the mid of the United States of America. We're going to Monrovia, Indiana.
Yes, we are. We're about to be whisked away.
Whisked away, indeed.
What a journey it's going to be.
Hold on. I need to go spend 26 minutes in funeral proceeding.
Yes, it's a long take.
It was a very long take.
So we're talking about the Frederick Wiseman documentary, Monrovia, Indiana. We saw this a little over a week ago now, right?
I think exactly a week, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Northwest Film Forum here in Seattle. I liked it quite a bit. You were positive, but a little cooler than me.
So-so.
So-so. Okay. I think this was, for both of us, our first Frederick Wiseman documentary.
Yes.
Made like 100 or something.
Of fame, he did Ex Libris last year, is that correct?
I think that's
right.
That's
the New York Library. It's like 3.5-hour documentary. Mm-hmm. And somehow, reading the reviews of that, it feels like we should have watched that one instead because it would have gone by faster.
It's possible.
Than this 2-hour documentary went by.
This was lengthy. Yeah, we were approaching this as non-Wiseman aficionados.
Correct. And off of quite a few feature films, so I was not ready for the steady gait of him as documentary.
And we went into this, you were very hungry. Are you hungry for more Wiseman?
I am.
Oh, cool. Okay.
I am in spite of this. In spite of the way that I felt about this title, I am very hungry for Ex Libris, and probably like 3 other... I'd probably just hop on Letterboxd, look at the top documentaries that he's made, and just try to watch them. I just because I didn't love this documentary doesn't mean it wasn't great. Yeah, I think it was great. I just didn't particularly like it. Some of that had to do with me just feeling like I was in my normal life. Yeah. And some of it having to do with the fact that I was extra-textually quite hungry and unable to eat.
You were mad.
Counting down the minutes. But it's like going to an art exhibit that you don't quite understand, but that affects you. It was very affecting. And I feel like I know what it is like to go be in the city of Monrovia. Yeah. I don't completely agree with the editing choices of what was depicted and how it was depicted. I think that there was quite a bit of bias being exhibited by him as a documentarian in some of the scenes. But I do feel like within the city limits of Monrovia, I know what the average earner is doing.
Yeah. And remind me, and listener, where you grew up.
I grew up here in Washington.
Right, but like what specific town?
Arlington, Machias, Stanwood.
Got it. Yeah, because coming out of the movie, you said this felt just like Arlington to me.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, Arlington or Stanwood.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, as I was thinking about that, I was like, it's a good point. Like, would I want to watch a documentary like this about my hometown? Probably not. I don't know that it would show me anything interesting or illuminate anything for me.
No, like the most interesting thing to me was how long it took them to go over the fact that they wanted to make 2 benches in the Lions Club.
Right.
Because ever since I've been little, I've always wondered, like, what goes on in the Lions Club?
Yeah.
And now I know.
You've been dying, huh?
I've been dying to know.
So yeah, that was actually kind of helpful for me, because I thought to myself, I would not want to watch this about my own hometown, Fort Collins, Colorado.
Yeah.
But I think this is the kind of documentary that I would want made about my hometown to show to somebody else, for them to see what it feels like to live in Fort Collins, Colorado, and what the people do, what the rituals are like. Yeah, what they talk about.
What their biases might be.
What the institutions are. Yeah. What the problems are. But, yeah, I mean, how can you argue with somebody who... Like, if somebody did go to the New York Public Library every single day, like, would one of those librarians be interested in Ex Libris? Maybe, but that also sounds like it might be tremendously boring for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the reason Ex Libris is interesting is because I love books personally.
Yeah.
And so the idea of the New York libraries in my head is a very lovely idea. It goes back to like Page Master lore, you know? Where like I just got
movie.
Yeah, I've got this romantic entanglement with libraries and books, and I think it would be very interesting to see what is considered the most prolific library in a documentary form.
Yeah. But yeah, it did just make me realize, having not seen any of his other docs, I assume that everybody's probably going to have their own favorite Wiseman, just based on where you're from, what you do, and what institutions therefore interest you, and what places interest you, right? Like this, for you, I think you maybe even said this, it was just too close to home.
Yeah.
You're like, this isn't that foreign to me. It might be in Indiana, but...
it did not feel foreign.
Yeah.
The only
like,
thing that it made
that?
me realize was that I'd prefer to live in Pawnee.
Yeah. Makes sense. Rather just chill with Leslie Knope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go see how Tom Haverford is doing.
Yeah.
Check in on DJ Roomba. You know.
Yeah. But do you think the style interested you enough that you would be interested in the docs?
Yeah, I am interested, and I think that extra textually, I'm really interested in him manifesting his biases in what he chooses to show. Because he goes to these really non-biased shots of the farmland, of making meat and making pizza, in traffic, and the fair, and these old men singing the song for nobody in the crowd. You know, these are great documentary footage takes. And then he spends a lot of time showing non-verbal racism. And I do question that choice, because I think it's important to have it.
Yeah.
But he kept going back to it. It was a focal point.
That was in those meetings,
yes.
right?
Yeah, there
town
is
council meetings, I guess.
There is a woman who is repeatedly using terminologies and phrases that you can tell she's beating around the bush when she's not saying what she means. And I think it's important to show that, at least the first time. But he kept going back. I think he goes back 3 or 4 times.
That same group.
Yeah, to that same group, and her doing something that is extra textually racist from what we understand about Monrovia. Whereas he does this school shot where the kids are in band, and then he pans over, and he really makes you feel how few African Americans are in this community by going over the stadium bleachers.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a lot better non-biased way of bringing his point across than revisiting this same group. And I think that he tries to draw a correlation between I don't exactly know how to put this, but he tries to draw a correlation between the feelings that these people need to have being expressed in church openly by a pastor during a wedding proceeding and a funeral proceeding, and then how the inverse of that is taking place in the city government. And I don't think that the point came across as eloquently as he intended.
That's interesting. Yeah, so you saw a point. You saw him trying to make a point.
Yeah, I think don't know if he even knows that he's trying to make a point, but I think that he sees that there is a clear difference between what is happening in this church and what is happening in these meetings. And that he's cross-correlating them to show, kids are always bored in this town. Whether they're dealing with the teacher telling them for God knows how long, like, about sports and how important basketball was.
That was the first shot of the movie, right?
Yeah. And then there's a girl who's really wanting to get out of the church during, I think it's the wedding proceeding. And then he's always cross-cutting back to that city council.
Yeah.
And one guy's always stressed out about the actual logistics of how we would make this thing work and how to change things. One guy is like a really old guy who knows how things actually work. And he's not too attached to getting all cut up and stuff.
Yeah. And
then one lady who's older and wears glasses, like, actually is kind of like on the ball a lot more than you would think. Yeah. Based on how her body language is portrayed. And then one gal's really against everything. And she's kind of the racist one.
Yes.
And the way that those are interchanged with the church proceedings, whether it's a funeral, a sermon, or a wedding, I feel like there's a point there. Do you agree?
I agree, but I think that is an interesting question. It's like, is he unintentionally making a point or intentionally? I think that is, to me, it's a little hard to know.
I think a documentary filmmaker, 40 documentaries in, knows they're making a point. If they don't know they're making a point, then I would be very worried.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my only counter evidence from that would be how comprehensive this documentary is in showing us just like all kinds of facets of life in Monrovia, and therefore,
well, within the city limits, right?
Right.
Because there's the townships around Monrovia that are the crucial element to the city council.
And those meetings about growth.
We never go there.
Yeah.
We never go anywhere outside the exact city limits of Monrovia.
Right.
Which is why it felt so much like Stanwood to me, because the farmland in Stanwood is part of the city limits.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree. I mean, I think unintentionally or not, I think there is a very valid argument, as you are making, about a conclusion he seems to be trying to arrive at. However, on the spectrum of truth in documentary filmmaking, I think I would still, for my own movie going, place Wiseman much closer to an unbiased documentary filmmaker relative to many other documentary filmmakers that I've seen.
I absolutely agree. I'm always looking for a bias in a documentary, though. And sometimes I love the bias, right? We watched that that movie about McQueen. Mm-hmm. You did not like it. It had tons of bias.
Yeah.
Somehow I liked it.
Yeah.
5'2" had bias. We both found a way to love it.
Right.
This is just one of those things where I totally agree, but I think that there's bias happening. And even though it's so subjectively little bias,
mm-hmm.
I think that this is I think this is maybe one of the best documentary filmmakers that there will probably ever be. Yeah. And so I want to be even more critical to try to understand this. Yeah. And I do think that there's a bias somewhere in there. And I think that this documentary filmmaker's bias is so much more interesting than anyone else's, even though it's tiny. It's because of how important a documentary filmmaker this will be.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you can argue that just by turning on a camera and presenting whatever you shot to an audience, there is bias inherent in that, right? You have chosen to show us one thing over another, so it's kind of impossible to, I think one could argue it is impossible to present something truly unbiased. So to interrogate, like, whatever biases you think are there is kind of what makes this kind of documentary making interesting, right? Yeah.
And so I think
you can't help but wonder, like, what didn't we see, right?
Yes, that's one of the things.
Yeah.
Because there's definitely buildings we don't go into.
Sure. Yeah.
We didn't see the bank from the inside.
I think you're right.
And I thought we would after the Lions Club meeting.
Yeah.
But the way it ends with the funeral, and the way that capstones and really feels like it brings a point to the documentary, just makes me want to double down and say that he's trying to make a point. And I don't know what that is. But I feel like it's somewhere in that cross comparison, that Venn diagram of what we're seeing, of the non-biased city, the biased city council, and the spiritual fulfillment that the citizens are finding within the church.
That's fascinating. I think like you came at that scene from a slightly different angle than mine, but I think our angles probably intersected at some point that I can't pinpoint, because I was just thinking more about the fact that like we get all these shots of the land itself just sort of unadorned. Then we're getting the land being processed, the animals being processed. We're seeing the people consuming that product in the grocery stores. We get those close shots of the fruits and the vegetables. We see the people just living on the land, and then we ultimately seeing the people go back into the land.
That's a great way of putting it. Yeah, I did not think about it like that.
Right?
That's
like that was kind of this circularity to it that came to mind for me. But like, how do I put that together with the like spiritual and kind of governmental focus that he's also doing? Right? Like, I think that's kind of hard, but I think that's kind of what makes it a fun documentary, I guess.
It is. No, I'm really glad you brought that stuff up, because like I didn't remember the grocery store scene and stuff like that. But now that you say that, like I'm starting to wonder if the farmers have more in common with the school teachers than the school teachers have in common with the other government workers.
Right. I agree. Which
is, it's a very interesting like trifecta of things. Like you can keep spinning the trifecta, and like the categories that are in it change, and it still holds up as a trifecta.
Yeah.
This is a better documentary than my stomach was willing to give it credit for.
You were hungry, and it showed you food.
We recorded 2 episodes before we did went to see it, and then UW had won that football game, so we stood in line at Dick's for 20 minutes and did not make any progress.
Correct.
There were car accidents on the interstate, so by the time we arrived, we got there just in time, and then they squandered my tea. Squandered. So
a number of incidents that didn't go your way.
I had a rough Saturday.
Yeah, and then there were shots of pizza rolls being made, and you were audibly groaning, and I'm like, this is going to be a 2. This is going to be a 2 out of 5 for Taylor.
You were rolling up your coat, getting ready to stuff it in my mouth as I was making those delicious sounds.
Did that ever shift? Did you ever lose your appetite in this documentary?
No.
Because there were some...
Even when they were shooting the
moments.
pigs and killing the cows, I was just like, ooh, that's some dead meat.
What about the surgery on the dog, though?
Oh,
I wasn't crazy about that one.
I mean, it didn't affect my appetite because I was just so hungry.
You were that hungry.
But that was the single most abhorrent thing in the entire documentary, which is very interesting because the racism that woman exudes is so disgusting. But nothing is as disgusting as bringing a dog in for voluntary surgery to cut off its tail.
Yeah.
That was I was sickened, but my stomach was hungry.
There you have it. Yeah, I remember thinking to myself, like, no matter where this is, I haven't ever been in a room in a veterinary hospital and witnessed this kind of thing. No matter where this would affect me.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely.
And it's only
it should be illegal.
Yeah, and it's only as these kind of images accumulate that you get a sense for this all characterizing a particular time and place.
Yeah. Do you think that it's exhibiting bias by showing us the animals dying for legitimately good reasons and that they're living their lives in a community? Like the animals of Monrovia that do get murdered don't seem to be living bad lives. Like they're getting as ethical a treatment as you could get within this context, and then it's capstoned by this thing that's going to continue to live, getting this horrendous surgery.
Yeah,
and I mean, I'm not trying to criticize. I think that it might be a good use of storytelling technique to show these animals that are living together as they were intended. Like they have all their hooves, you know. The process of getting them on the trailer might be troubling, but it's necessary, you know. And then what happens to the dog at the end of this slaughterhouse, sequence is worse than the dead animals.
I agree. I hadn't really put those two together. I kept kind of wondering, I'm like, is he critiquing this farming practice? I couldn't make up my mind, and I'd be curious to hear like someone's, like a member of PETA watch this documentary and see how they interpret that sequence of images. But yeah, in contrast to that dog, you're like, this seems like way more bizarre to do this relative to what we're doing to the pigs. This seems so antiquated. I hadn't really connected those, but I think that's
I hadn't
fair
connected
point.
them until you started connecting the ground. And then I was like, oh yeah, there's like 9 different ways of connecting everything.
There's a lot of ways to tackle this. And I feel like he does occasionally lighten the mood, which I really appreciated. Like
he did do that occasionally.
Yeah, not a lot. I don't want to.
No, bring up the instance, because I don't really remember them, but I remember they did get lighter. Like when the kids would scoff, is what I'm thinking of.
The one that was coming to mind for me was when there was like a little mattress sale at the high school gym, and people are learning about all the bacteria that seeps into their mattress
and the liquids of the body.
Yeah, pretty nasty. They looked I don't know, just nice shots of showing just people experiencing something like disgust, like everybody does.
I think I actually dropped facts from that scene within a week after watching
the
movie to someone.
Nice.
It's like, yeah, did you know this?
Yeah. But even that, like, kind of shows me just, it reinforces how small the town is that this would happen in, like, the high school gym. Like, I would go to the mattress store if I was going to buy a mattress.
Which one? There's, like, 9 of them.
I might go to Amazon, actually.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, exactly.
You might get a Casper. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, there's, like, where we're at in this metropolis of a city, there's just so much. It is very interesting to think about what it's like to live in middle America.
Yeah.
Which this does really well. I think that it feels like going to the art museum. It feels like you experience something, and I've had plenty of art museum experiences that have profoundly changed the way that I look at the world or understand the world, but that I didn't enjoy. And I'd say that this is like that. It's not like watching a movie that's bad. It's like going to an art exhibit you don't exactly love, but it still affects the way that you interpret the world for the rest of your life in a positive way. Yeah.
Yeah, I would not recommend this to anybody looking to take their mind off things after work.
No.
I think that's a fair analogy. It is more like an exhibit than a flick.
Yeah. Those are my favorite. I love the flicks.
You do like flicks. But yeah, I mean, I'm eager to see just this approach applied to other places. I was just like scanning the other topics or the other documentaries that he's made, like, everything from like ballet to a mental institution. It's pretty comprehensive, as you would expect from this documentary.
Ooh, double feature, Unsane and the Mental Institution.
Ah, there you go. Nice. So I think it is an effective approach, even if it is kind of exhausting.
It's
that
definitely
sounds maybe
exhausting.
overly critical, but yeah.
No. I think you have to have. I think it would be useful to have a strong constitution before you begin this, because it is deeply affecting intellectually and gross.
Yeah.
Visually with what happens to animals, and just exhausting because of some of the longer single shots.
Yeah.
But it's still, I don't like to use the term important for films because I think it can get a little bit pompous when we talk about how Suspiria is one of the most important films of 2018. Like that's going to sound pompous to anybody that doesn't like it.
Yeah.
But I think maybe this is an important film for documentaries. I think this is an important documentary for anyone ever moving forward in time, because it can tell you what a city was like in 2017 and 2018 in the middle of rural America.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of thought to myself at times, like, I wish Wiseman had been around forever so that I could watch what he made in, like...
1920.
Yeah, exactly. Just, like, that would give me a better sense of what it felt like to live in the 20s than any other movie made now about the 20s, right? So, keep at it, Frederick.
Keep at it. And with that, we will cheers, recommend this title, and move on to the house that Jack built.
Are you allowed to speak along the way? I was thinking there might be rules.
Let me put it this way. Very few make it all the way without uttering a word. But do carry on merrily. Just don't believe you're going to tell me something I haven't heard before.
If you feel like screaming, I definitely think that you should.
Nobody wants the help!
It was a comedy.
You were laughing often.
I laughed a lot. You did not laugh but twice. Do I remember that correctly?
A handful of times, yeah.
Like, at one point, it was so absurd that you didn't know how to not laugh, if I remember
that's
correctly.
accurate.
And then, like, maybe one other moment really got you to laugh, but I don't remember you chortling nearly as much as me. In fact, the crowd did not chortle quite
Not
as much as
I
me.
expected, yeah. We can dive into individual sections, but since we're talking about comedy, I think the second incident where he's pretending to be a police officer, maybe one of the funnier moments for me, as I'm just recollecting when I did laugh out loud.
Well,
I think that was maybe it.
Was the intro funny, or was the outro even funnier?
I don't think I was laughing out loud at the outro.
No, I mean the outro of episode 2.
Oh, got it.
In which she is in a tarp being dragged behind him, and then the proverbial rain begins to pour.
Easily the funniest moment in the movie for me.
Okay.
For sure. Laughing out loud, wholeheartedly enjoyed it.
Good.
Yes.
Good. So, this movie makes no qualms about its corollary to the magnum opus of Dante Alighieri, The Divine Comedy. It has Virgil, who is the guide to Dante in Divine Comedy, as the guide to Matt Dillon's Jack. Has a very similar structure. It, in fact, goes to the ninth circle of hell and shows him the exit at the very end, in which he could just climb around and make it.
Didn't quite make it.
And he thinks he can. I think one crucial thing is that I saw this as a kind of a scathing self-reflection by Von Trier of himself, and you did not. Is that correct? That's the sense I got from our conversation in the parking lot.
Yeah, we had very briefly, immediately after watching it, talked about like whether or not Jack is Von Trier.
I feel like it was just me yelling at you about how I loved it, and then me feeling really bad about yelling at you.
It was
because
passionate.
I loved it.
Passions were there. And for the vast majority of the film, I definitely felt like Jack was this vessel through which Von Trier's expressing himself. The only time the reason why I was hesitant to commit to that right in the moment was as I was thinking about certain bits of the dialogue when he's talking about like Hitler and I think like Mussolini as artists or something like that.
Oh, I thought he was interesting. I was interpreting him saying like that socialism is the best way to kill people en masse.
Understood. I guess I lost his like train of thought there, so I'm like, I think you're making a pretty bold claim about some pretty evil dudes, so I'm not quite sure if you are letting this sociopath make this claim, or if this is still Von Trier talking. I'm like, this is easily like the most.
That's
like,
where I got mixed up too.
Thing.
I was like, "What's your point?"
Yeah. So, as soon as you asked me, like, do you think Jack is Von Trier? That's what came to mind, and I was like, maybe that was him. I'm not sure what his point was, so I'm hesitant to say that's him because it's quite provocative, to use that word. Just go ahead and get that over with. And that left me a little unsure.
Wait, are you saying The House That Jack Built is a provocative film?
I'm going there. Is that daring or what?
He only kills 2 children.
I know.
He only cuts off 2 breasts.
I guess that's kind of soft.
He doesn't even kill the men at the end.
You're right. He went soft on us.
Quite a bit of this film I wish that you had seen his previous films for, because there's a lot that I would like to ask you. Specifically about that double feature he did with Dogville, and what was the sequel to that with Bryce Dallas Howard reprising Nicole Kidman's role?
Is that Manderley?
Yes.
I haven't seen that one either. Yeah.
There is something that he does which is deeply offensive and troubling, but perhaps
in those movies
not entirely untrue about some eternal truths he speaks to about the way that humans behave. And there seems to be a corollary between the end in which the African American asks him or tells him that is not Full Metal Jacket. And then they all end up living. All the men end up living with the gun pointed at their heads because of what he does. And that is kind of a creep back to either Manderley or Dogville. I think Dogville specifically. And like, it's really troubling to even bring up because it's Von Trier and he's using extremely provocative racism, right? But there is a corollary, and there's a corollary to the fact that he kills all of his women, or at least beats them. And that's why I saw Jack as a reflection of Lars, because all the women die, some more brutally than others, but they all die, and he figures out how to twist them into something. He figures out how to make the boy into something more jeering. I have been watching quite a few short films this year, and as a consequence have watched all of his films that he made, which were all short films before he was 18. And there is quite a bit in that hunting scene tied to those short films.
Incident 3.
Yeah. And I can't really draw out more. I can just say, like, if you're going to watch this film or you liked this film and you want more, go on Letterboxd, look up Lars von Trier, and then there should be all the titles there, and in the comments there should be either my links or someone else's links to those titles, because there is a huge meta conversation happening beyond the Divine Comedy, Virgil, Dante Alighieri thing happening. There's him reckoning with himself into the shame. I think that when he goes to try to pay for that bullet that he needs, and he pulls out Riley Keough's breast wallet and the money from the breast, I think that is maybe the most scathing he gets on himself. Like, there's this rotting human flesh that he's taking the money out to buy the thing that he wants to show people with, because he needs the bullet to show people this cool scene, and he doesn't get what he needs from it. And I find that very interesting. Like that he's interrogating himself on this level. It was not only, I mean, the whole thing is interesting, but I found that to be actually fascinating. Yeah. That he was criticizing himself in that one area specifically.
That's kind of an interesting way to interpret that particular image. Him taking money out of this particular disturbing image, which is kind of how he makes his living as a director.
It specifically made me think of Melancholia, in which he gets Kirsten Dunst topless, I believe, numerous times before killing her entire planet.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so as I've mentioned to you, but not the listeners, I've only seen a couple of his films. Melancholia a long time ago, Nymphomaniac, but only part 1.
Rated, not unrated.
Correct.
Totally different films. It'd be like watching The House That Jack Built rated.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
We don't know. Well, we don't know what that looks like. I guess yet, right? I don't know what they'll show.
You
what
can't
they won't show.
cut off the breasts.
Yeah.
You can't kill the children. You can't disfigure the child. You can't have the child frozen with the smile. Like, it's a totally different movie.
Yeah. And I've seen Antichrist. So the fact that it was self-referential, was clear to me. But whether or not that he was really saying any of this with much conviction or sincerity, I kind of questioned. Just funny. That's what you said about Shirkers, right? It was an issue of sincerity. I just, for a movie that was so heavily focused on coupling that voiceover dialogue and that conversation between him and Virgil with these stories, implies to me like that he has so much to say, and I just felt like there wasn't that much there.
Really?
Kind of, yeah. It felt, narrow-minded is one phrase that comes to mind, because it's mainly about his own work. It can only ever be so good if you're only talking about your own work.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Why isn't Shirkers narrow-minded then?
It's a fair question. I think she did a much better job of involving me in what this experience she's telling me about felt like. I don't think he's really telling me about, he's definitely not being specific to me about something. I don't know. I don't know that that's really a fair comparison. She's telling me about something she experienced, and I'm like, I completely get it. That sounds terrible. In The House That Jack Built, I think he's making some analogies, and just making a movie like it was a written dialogue, with more effort than I felt like there was actual material. I think you disagree.
No, I completely agree, and that's why I love it. They continuously go back to find the material, and the house will manifest. Until the very end, he doesn't realize what the material is. Then he builds the house within a solid frozen structure. Which to me is a conversation about his filmmaking process and about releasing the films that he's released to Hollywood.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe I'm just a lot more there for these types of oratories than you are. I really like oratories. Like the day that I watched this, I had just finished The Sunshine Limited, which is a Cormac McCarthy audio play. Not even intended to be read, but like you listen to it, and it's a white man who is saved by a black man, and the white man is called by his name, and the black man is called the Black by the play. And that is also the style that Lars von Trier has had within Dogville, where he calls them by very derogatory, racist titles. But he's still making a point, which is so horrendous and fascinating that it's not just disgusting, it's something deeper than that, because he also comes through and makes like Danny Glover a true hero in Dogville, which is not something that I expected 1 minute before it happened. He makes his films are such interrogations of the human spirit and bias and the most revolting facets of humanity, and also jokes at you being offended that I don't even feel comfortable talking about it. Like I don't even feel comfortable saying what he's done in his films, but they are absolute expressions of artistry that I think are important, and it's just hard to really identify how I completely understand. Like, how do I use my words to say you shouldn't like this movie, but it's okay to love it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm thinking a little bit about how his work compares to somebody like Gaspar Noé, who isn't quite as grotesque, maybe. I think
he kills a lot less people.
Von Trier kind of takes it to a new level.
And he doesn't do anything to women.
It's isn't that insightful here to say that he kind of takes it to a new level in this particular film. But
well, you didn't see Nymphomaniac.
True. But yeah, I don't... Yeah. I can't think of anything that Noé has made. Even in Irreversible, the rape scene in the alleyway, it still feels like there is a distance there between what Von Trier provides between us and his acts on screen. I feel like by just talking so much about provocation and the value of revolting art in the way he does is sort of unnecessary if you just tell a story and believe in that having value. Like, I think that's what Gaspar Noé does.
No, that's interesting. I think that I don't think that Von Trier knows how to make a story without going back to these basic ideas of brutally murdering a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Or having her get raped. Mm-hmm. Or having her enjoy a rape. I think that he is aware that he is unable to create a project in which he does not become fascinated with how a woman feels about something happening to her.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, you're right, that is his artistic limit.
Mm.
But I think that he also knows that's his artistic limit, and he's trying to express that he doesn't know why either.
I don't know if that's that interesting to me. For a director,
I agree. I think that if you don't like, I think that if someone makes a myopic work of art, you can't be interested unless you like their other works of art. And if you didn't like the other works of art, why would you like something even more myopic and self-serving?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I think it is partly just due to the formal approach here. Like, I think there are some visual ideas that I thought were stunning and that have like actually made me very close to upping my rating. Like his talk about the negative and finding lightness in the dark of the image. That is just a terrific, I think, visual metaphor for what he's doing thematically.
What about the end? No. Exactly what you're saying. What about that end shot? When Matt Dillon falls and then the negative fades in. Is that working more for you now?
Idea-wise, yes, but like, I don't know that Von Trier as a visual stylist like really does much for me. Like, I don't think that any of that outro looked great. I just think none of those struck me as like fascinating.
Have you ever seen This Is the End?
The Seth Rogen movie? Yeah, long time ago.
The images looked the same to me.
In a good way.
Yeah, in a comedy way. Like,
gotcha.
I felt like that's how we've all thought about some of the things that are in the Divine Comedy. When we hear about the landscapes being described, those are kind of the loose images that I would conjure. And that I would say everyone conjures. Of the columns, of the paths. So, I mean, maybe there is good criticism there, but for me, I can't see it because I'm just like that. I've seen what he's showing me before, and I like it. And I thought one of the most breathtaking visuals mixed in with sound was the scythe.
Oh yeah. Of the fields being cleared. Yeah.
And the fields breathing.
Yeah. There were moments like that I would agree, that were like visually appealing to me. But I don't know, for too much of the movie I felt like I doubted his ability to just compose like great shots. To me, I don't know.
It definitely was a closer. film than you're not going to get a great shot because it's very close up body work.
Yeah. More close ups than any wide or medium shots. Even it's mostly on. I mean, it's a lot on Jack's face until we see what he did, which is usually pretty gnarly. Matt Dillon, I did like quite a bit. This is like, I don't know, this is when ratings kind of fall apart for me because it's like there are things that I liked, there are things I didn't like it's hard to put them together. I don't know that I would change a lot about his performance, and I think that is critical to this succeeding. And when I did laugh, I think I was laughing pretty hard. I just found myself skeptical about like the brilliance of some of these ideas that I think I felt like him saying. I felt like it was him trying to prove he is self-aware when I felt like he doesn't need to do that. He just needs to make a movie. Like, what would we lose if this was just a movie about Jack?
We would lose the movie. I don't think Lars is in a place to make this movie without it being a reflection on his own self.
I don't know that I could. I don't know that I can't help but envision this movie. I would be interested to see what this plays like had he just taken a more straightforward approach, kind of coupled with some of these visual metaphors that he has, like the negative, like Jack turning this into an art for himself, and the idea of finding a sort of morbid beauty in things. Like, that itself is very provocative, right? Like, why is any of that beautiful? Well, for me, it's partly because it makes you as a viewer feel alive. And I don't know, maybe just because of how dense it is with that voiceover, it's the kind of thing that just might reward multiple viewings as you kind of just get more involved with that dialogue yourself. Because the first time, I mean, I'd be lying if I said there weren't times where I was just thinking to myself, my God, that is gnarly, right? And that kind of means you just have to revisit it and see what he's doing all this for.
Were you ever sickened by the imagery?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I was never sickened. And I don't like to say that because that sounds like I'm like a bad person.
No,
it really does sound like that. But Monrovia actually sickened me. This did not sicken me. Even when I knew that what was happening was terrible, I was just like, that's hilariously gross. Like, that boy's leg is not the way that boy's leg should be. But the way that the imagery was shot and edited afterwards never felt super real.
I would agree.
So I felt like I was allowed to laugh because I knew that this wasn't real. I could completely suspend belief and just live in disbelief. Which is the only way that I think you can unlock the laugh track internally for this movie.
Yeah.
And because Uma Thurman's head has clearly got paint on it, and that is just CG making the hole in the middle of her head, it's okay to laugh at the fact that there's not even a brain in the black hole.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of murderous joke happening that I think if the Viscera was more real, wouldn't have been unlocked. But because it was so unreal, I was able to find the laugh track.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Like, to me, I don't know that I would call it unreal. Like, to me, it was realistic. But there was, if I was to criticize myself in suggesting that he should have just made this a straightforward narrative about Jack being a serial killer, the problem with that might be that he would remove some of that kind of, like, critical distance, and you wouldn't be able to laugh at it anymore. It would feel too just direct, I guess. I would agree. There is sort of this artifice that, despite us being able to describe these things like they were the most awful things we ever saw, they don't quite feel like that because of this kind of perspective we're getting.
Yeah, like if I had to explain what happened to people in this movie, to other people, it would sound like the worst movie ever.
Yeah.
But if I told you what the worst images were in a movie this year, this would not come up.
Yeah.
This would come up in the funniest images of the year, even though all the images are of death.
Yeah.
Which I think is, personally for me, I'm getting a lot out of how he turned this film into a reflection of the Divine Comedy for himself, and took himself through the 9 circles of hell, and used this to criticize himself, and really interrogate his own internal veins and what it is that makes him tick as an artist. I hear the criticism you're making and how you want him to be able to make this as an original film, but I don't think you're taking into account that he as an artist has to be able to access how to write this screenplay. And the way that he comes to writing this screenplay is a reflection and interrogation of his own work. He didn't come to it as just a separate story. He had to interrogate his own process. And I think that that's what happens in Moby Dick, in Dante Alighieri's The Divine Comedy, in Faust, you know, in maybe the Brothers Karamazov, even Dostoevsky is criticizing himself. I think that you have to be able, in these giant opuses, you have to, as an author, criticize yourself, or else you lose a level of resolution of truth for the project. I think this is even true of Stephen King's The Dark Tower. If he wouldn't have made himself a character that got to interact with Roland, I don't know that we would have ever gotten book 7. Like, I think that he had to bring himself into the story. And I think that with anything this big, you either have to be the character or that character has to interact with you. Or with you as another character. And I think that Jack was the character, but I also think Virgil was him. I think that he was both halves. And I think that Lars kind of guided himself to his ego. You know, like his id took his ego on a ride. And he said, his ego was like, what's that bridge that's broken off? No one's ever made it, but if you climb across, you get to go to heaven. You're on level 6. And then his ego goes, we'll make it. We can go. And I feel like that's what that movie is. I feel like that movie is his ego saying, no, we can go to heaven.
Yeah. I guess maybe it's just a reservation about having already established himself as this provocateur to it makes it that much harder to kind of give him credit as now an apologist or a person critiquing himself, because that seems like the only next thing he could do to draw attention to himself. Why? The only thing a narcissist can do to draw attention away from themselves is talk about somebody other than themselves. So
you don't think he did that with Charlotte Gainsbourg in Nymphomaniac?
It's been too long since I've seen that. That's possible. Yeah, that's fair. Maybe he has done that in other works. Maybe I would rate those higher than this one.
I mean, I would say that Stellan Skarsgård is him in Nymphomaniac, and that Charlotte Gainsbourg is all of his women that he's ever put in a film conglomerated together.
Yeah.
And then what happens as a procedural, I found fascinating. I would put it in the vein of the Millennium series that Noomi Rapace did in the Netherlands, I think. Regardless, Sweden.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I feel like I'm on the outside looking in, because it seems like most people haven't gotten more out of it than me. So maybe it just really has to do with having experienced more of his filmography. But to me, there is just something not particularly cinematic about this self-reflexive approach. Like this versus, say, The Other Side of the Wind, where we can argue at length about the extent to which John Huston's character is Orson Welles. And to me, that's what enriches that experiences. That is that ambiguity. Whereas here,
there's a huge amount of distance.
Yeah, and I think this these conversations might be even more fun to me if it was not so clear when we're hearing Von Trier and when we're not. Even though, like, I'm kind of doing that a little bit with Jack. I just think a more conventional approach might have been the most provocative thing to do in a way, in light of what he's already done.
You might be right. I think that I found a tremendous amount of honesty in this film, and I really value honesty in film. And the way that I can interpret this in multiple ways, the way that I could with Mother last year, is, to me, makes it an incredibly useful cornerstone just as a film in his work and as a film this year. Like, I could spend endless hours thinking about, is Virgil Von Trier or not? As well. Because if Virgil is Von Trier, and what if Virgil is Von Trier and Jack is just one of the Von Triers? What if what he's really saying is that Virgil is the deepest him, and that Virgil always guides him to this bridge where he falls and dies because of his ego, trying to make this perfect film, and it never works out. And then Virgil goes back to find the next soul to guide through the tunnels to try to make it again. And will the next one be one that's a little bit better? And will it be because he didn't try to climb across the edge and reach heaven, but he went back to level 6? Like, as a metatextual interrogation on all these ideas, it's just deeply fascinating to me. Like, I would love to talk about, I would love to rewatch this unrated version and Mother, and then just sit in a cafe with you and talk for 12 hours. It's just one of those, this is one of those movies where you could just keep going and say, okay, I buy that, but what if that's not true? And then 2 more hours of conversation unlock.
It's one that I could easily see myself kind of swinging one way or the other on later down the road as I become more familiar with him, and maybe just become a little more open to it. Anytime there is something this kind of self-centered, that's just me. I can't help be kind of skeptical. Like, to me, I just have a high bar for somebody talking about themselves for that long.
That's okay. We just differ because I think that Sandy Tan talked about herself and you don't.
It's true.
But
it's true.
There's just different markers for what you're willing to buy into, I think. And I mean anyone, for what anyone's willing to buy into. Like, there's just different markers. I think the first time I watched Antichrist, I was like, no. Just no. Willem Dafoe, no. And then I watched it again, I think 2 years ago, and it opened up a little bit more to me. Because I was less closed off going into it. But I think it does. I think Von Trier's films, more than any other director, completely depend on if you come in embracing and open, or if you come in closed off. Because if you come in closed off, it's not going to open up. Because it's just going to get more harsh and more brutal. Dogville, I actually stopped watching 30 minutes in, turned it off, came back to it a month later with like an intention to be open to the film, and completely restarted it. Because the first time I watched it, I was just like, I can't do this. There's basically no setting. There's tape on the floor. So you have to like be willing to suspend your disbelief and also keep up with dialogue. And what setting is which. And that she's actually in a cave right now, even though she's in the open. And like, so I definitely have been where you're at. And I would say that you might be right. I don't know.
I'm really trying to think hard now about why I was more open to Shirkers than this one, considering they both are made by directors talking about themselves.
One is an actual film, one is a documentary.
I think it might have to do with the specificity of experience in Shirkers. It was very easy for me to relate.
Are you saying Von Trier hasn't actually killed all these people?
That is exactly what I'm saying. He's
You
a
heard it
phony.
here first, folks.
He is a phony.
Has not killed anyone.
And his established reputation that he is clearly riffing on. That's why, like, I can't quite put them together. I think Sandy Tan's just saying, I had this thing happen. It sucked. Von Trier has earned this reputation as a person deliberately trying to push people's buttons, and I kind of feel like...
Do you really think that?
Yeah, I kind of do.
Okay. I don't know.
You don't think so?
I don't. No. I think that young Von Trier, 90s Von Trier, the Von Trier that made Dogville, yeah. The Von Trier that made Manderley, no. I think something happened between 1998 and 2004 where he became humble, and he realized that or he was humbled. He didn't become humble. I wouldn't call him a humble person, but I think that he was humbled through life experience, through pulled funding, through the fact that Nicole Kidman would not continue. He had the cast Bryce Dallas Howard to reprise that role. I think that he realized that making films is a blessing, not a curse. And I think that maybe before he was making films as if they were a curse and he was blessing you with them. And now he's making them as if they are a blessing and presenting them as curses.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, would you recommend it to people who haven't seen most of his other work?
It depends on the person.
I kind of agree.
I think that... Are you talking about this film or him?
This film. The House that Jack Built.
I don't think so. I think that in order to watch Von Trier, you should be over 13 minimum, probably over 16. Unless you're very good at sleeping.
Right.
Because the imagery and the context does get quite volatile. But I think that necessary viewing beforehand for this would be Dogville, Manderley, and Nymphomaniac unrated. Both versions. I don't think that you can comprehend the journey of him and his female characters without those two films that are supposed to have the same protagonist, that are portrayed by two different actresses, which he did not count on, and then the evolution to Charlotte Gainsbourg. And all I can say is the evolution to Charlotte Gainsbourg, and then this, because there is a clear through line of what happens. I think Melancholia is great extra textually. Antichrist is not really that useful except for part 3 where he kills children. If you get to see the unrated version, I'd say that's the most crucial. And then if you want to understand his comedy, you do need to watch The Idiots, which I think was a 1995 release.
That's early.
Yeah. Not as early as
I mean,
teenage films.
I'm ragging on it hard, and I haven't talked about anything that I liked, which is the comedy, which I think does work quite well at times when he does manage to kind of create this weird distance between you as a viewer and what you're actually watching. And I think that is kind of a hilarious setup, that when Jack says he's a policeman, she won't let him in. Once he's an insurance man, oh, fine, come on in. How ironic. Like, the irony in that is hilarious.
You said you can double my insurance rate?
Yeah. Come on in. It. Great moment. Right? Hilarious. And I just cannot help but watch that scene and think about her in Men in Black. Right? When she's...
Yeah. She's the wife of the man who loves sugar.
Exactly. Yeah. She has that same expression of just, like, kind of confusion, but also interested in what you have to offer or something like that. She's great. And then it gets disturbing. I mean, I was, despite that distance, I was disturbed as I watched her die.
That's the difference. I never got disturbed by this movie.
No?
I think maybe the most disturbing thing was when he whistled before he shot the mother in the back. That did bother me a little bit. Not like I'm offended by the film, but like, ooh, that's nasty. You know, like, that's just a dirty thing to do. Like, if you're playing a video game, I think that that what's happening isn't real, but it still bothers you when it happens. It's that type of a thing.
Yeah, and then to cap off that incident with him after going back and forth between the car and the house, trying to clean everything up, only to drag blood across the town. That is a visual gag. That is great. That's hilarious.
Right?
So with the music cue as well, right? The David Bowie, right?
Okay, so this is where I ask you, is this an adapted screenplay or an original screenplay?
It's an original screenplay, right? Do you disagree?
I don't know. That's why I think it's an interesting question, because it is so deeply influenced by the Divine Comedy. Because Virgil is there from the get-go.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he just puts enough
I think it's 50-50.
New material there. I don't know.
No, there's lots of new material, but none of it exists without this old book.
Yeah.
You know, it's an interpretation of this great old book by this guy who's interrogating himself, trying to use the old book to interrogate himself, which is also, to me at least, a meta conversation about what we do with books like the Torah or the Bible. It's just fascinating to continue to interpret this film.
Yeah. We've talked about Riley Keough on other episodes, I think. Did you like her here?
I did. I was going to ask you, who's your favorite murderess? Who's your favorite person that got murdered?
Probably Uma Thurman, actually. Right off the bat.
She was the most distasteful to me.
Really?
She's too lippy.
Wow, that is what Jack would say.
I know. No, she just kept saying, she's the one that started it all.
Yeah.
Right? Because she was so abrasive. And I think that's what Lars wants you to take away. I think that he loves that someone can make the argument that this is all her fault. Because that's what Lars would maybe want to say of the muses that construe his vision.
Yeah.
It's not my fault that's how the film turned out. It's all her fault. He would say of a character within his film.
That's a good thing?
I don't think you can say it's a good thing or a bad thing. I just think it's an interesting thing.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I watched that scene thinking about Uma Thurman and her history with Quentin Tarantino.
Me too. Kill Bill, yeah.
Right? And
I think I sent you some images via text of her.
Yeah, I think you did. Kill Bill, it was just weird to bring that baggage with you and think about what she's talked about in her experience with Quentin Tarantino and how uncomfortable she was in certain scenes.
You mean the car crash?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because he hasn't done anything sexually.
No, definitely not.
No,
but I do remember that car crash
fucked
where
up with the car crash.
He kind of pressured her into it, and she was uncomfortable.
And now she's got lasting injuries.
Yeah, I don't think Von Trier is leveraging that here. But I just couldn't help but bring it to this scene and sort of appreciate she was nonetheless
in a car.
Yeah, and willing to do something that just invited the brutality. I really just kind of appreciated it and thought her performance was kind of hilarious.
As
and
you're
great.
describing this, it's just making me smile and giddy.
I know, which is weird.
I have a question. Do you think Margot Robbie has a non-car clause in her contract for Once Upon a Time?
Probably. Uma probably called her and was like, "Don't get into any cars. No vehicles. Don't do it." She was up there, Uma Thurman, as a favorite.
I think for me, just to interject, Keough is my favorite performance.
Yeah.
From a gal. She has such a deep range. I know you didn't like her in Hold the Dark, but I think that of all the actresses I've seen this year, Keough I think is at 4 titles. I don't remember all of them. I think one was this movie where she's a sister and she gets in a car and there's a car crash. I watched it on Hulu in like March. We talked about it before we ever started the podcast. It's one of those indie movies that I told you to get Hulu for.
I got nothing.
It's got Jennifer Garner in it, maybe.
Riley Keough was in a car crash? That's how it started?
No, it's like how it ends. No, she like watches her brother get in a car crash or something.
I got nothing.
It's this weird indie movie that she was in. You'll know it. Next time I see you, you'll go,
It's going to drive me nuts.
This is the movie. And then she was in Hold the Dark, obviously, in this film. And then she should have been in Under the Silver Lake this year. And then she was in a couple others. But I think that the range that she's capable of exhibiting, and specifically what she can do with her eyes, is crucial.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of the best things happening for acting right now. Other than Claire Foy taking roles as a supporting actress.
Yeah. I mean, I am just impressed by her willingness to kind of expose herself like she does. I don't know that that's that insightful. But I just have trouble comprehending what it feels like as an actress to kind of put yourself in that situation, which makes me actually really interested in what it's like to be on a Von Trier set, to stage these. Have you listened to many interviews with him?
Not in the last year.
Yeah.
I did when I was doing Nymphomaniac, which I did those in 2016, I think. I ran through both those.
Yeah.
So it's been a while.
Yeah, yeah. He'd be an interesting guy at some point. Maybe in the spring, because that's when we do all things to revisit. Even though you've seen, I guess you've seen most of his filmography.
Yeah, there's certain titles I would specifically be interested in revisiting.
Yeah, yeah. When I think of Von Trier, I also think about that Dogma 95 initiative. The commitment to shooting on location, expressing a personal vision, like to see how that sort of philosophy has sort of run throughout his work. That's not really like how I approach his movies now, because I don't know his filmography in total. It'd be fun to read that in total and then kind of like come back to it and see if that changes my thoughts on him.
It would be, maybe we'll do we'll see if the spring shapes up. I don't want to make any lasting plans. We've already got our Kung Fu future.
We do. We've
got our sci-fi spring. I don't want to tag on too many extras with the new releases that we have.
We do have summer, fall, winter in 2019.
Well, fall and winter are booked for the 2019 major releases, so...
This is true.
We've got spring and summer. Well, that's all we've got.
We can come back.
So I guess... Do you feel like Jack took a journey from the beginning to the end?
I think he took a journey, but for me it was a clunky journey. I don't think that this sort of 5-6 act structure, I think it was 5 plus an epilogue, was really smooth to me. And to me, I would have involved myself a bit more in how he evolved and how that attaches to Von Trier's concerns had this just flown like a more kind of traditional narrative. So, yes and no.
Okay.
You?
No, that's interesting. So you gave us Suspiria, which has a prologue and an epilogue and 6 acts, 4.5. But if I remember correctly, we both agreed that the epilogue and the prologue are troublesome to the film.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I deviate here in that the clunkiness I thought was contributive to the artistic vision. Like, I thought that he knew what he was doing and that its clunkiness kind of fed off of itself. Like, I can't describe how much I'm pairing this film with the Divine Comedy. Like, the whole thing is a comedy to me. Like, it's a brutal, crucial, terrible comedy, but it's all comedy. And the fact that Act 4 is, like, the shortest part, is that right? Or is it Act 5? No, it's Act 4. Right, yeah, Act 4, when he just, like, kills the girl that falls in love with him.
Yeah.
And then realizes he takes shitty photos.
Yeah.
And then brings her back with the other girl and takes photos. It's like 15 minutes or something. And then Act 5 with Riley Cow is like half an hour or 45 minutes or something. Like,
yeah.
I love how it sets you up with an expectation and then totally deviates from it. It's I just love Von Trier. What can I say?
Well, in relation to Suspiria, I think you could easily just lift out those title cards and it would play exactly the same. I do think that that's sort of just an aesthetic touch. I don't know that.
You think the prologue and the epilogue?
No. I mean, like, the title cards. Like, the fact that he's even dividing
I'm not talking
them.
about the title cards. I'm talking about... Yeah. I just listened to the podcast because I edited it. Yeah. So you might not remember. But we both agreed that the prologue and the epilogue, in which the psychiatrist is spent the most of time by the picture, is the weakest point. And that you can take small chunks from it and interject those in the beginning and ending of the full sequence of the film.
Yeah.
And it's a stronger film without the prologue and epilogue.
Gotcha.
And I'm saying that while we agree on that weakness, the weakness in this film, I didn't feel the act weakness. I felt like the weakness is true, but it's also... a tool that he's using for the picture to build and criticize itself within the picture.
Okay.
Like, I kept feeling him revisiting those moments.
Got it. I think that's where we deviate. I couldn't help but think he might just not know how to fill in these gaps and therefore has to divide this into chapters because he can't just draw a straightforward arc.
No. Completely disagree. Completely disagree.
I agree that we disagree.
I think you need to rewatch Melancholia, Dogville, Manderley, Nymphomaniac, Unrated Parts 1 and 2.
Unless that only excuses it in the context of his work. I think I might be criticizing him as a director. Like,
oh, that's fine.
That's like right. But that's part of film criticism. Is like, who are the great artists?
But how do you watch a Barry Jenkins picture and not remember all the Barry Jenkins pictures?
I watched Moonlight. I've never seen a Barry Jenkins picture.
Steve McQueen.
I watched 12 Years a Slave. I've never seen any other Steve McQueen pictures.
You never seen Shame?
Not until afterwards.
I didn't know that.
Never seen Hunger.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know then. When I watch movies, I'm absolutely biased by what I've seen before. Because I'm thinking, like, okay, Ridley, what are you doing that is like, I was absolutely fascinated by, what was that Michelle Williams picture with Mark Wahlberg?
A Ridley Scott one?
Yeah. Didn't
All
Ridley
the Money
Scott...
in the World?
Yeah, All the Money in the World. When I was halfway through watching that, I had this distant thought in the back of my head, like, this is the motherfucker that made Gladiator, and he makes the Alien movies? He made the James Franco Alien movie. What the fuck is going on? And like, I was able to appreciate how he's able to deviate his landscape panning shots on off-world, like, alien things, and also on, like, this little villa.
Yeah.
And that there's a correlation there.
Yeah.
And with Lars von Trier, when I was inside the freezer, I was thinking Manderley. I was thinking Dogville.
Yeah.
When I'm outside, I'm thinking Nymphomaniac. I'm thinking Melancholia, Antichrist, Idiots.
Yeah.
There is something bigger that's informed by everything else. It's like, if you read The Hobbit, it's not that you can't read it without reading Lord of the Rings. It's that if you read them all in context, there is more to it.
Yeah. Well, only to go back to the quote at the start of our podcast. You know, the object looks different depending on where you're standing. You are at the other end of the object. You have all this other information I don't have. We're at opposite ends. Cheers.
So our next podcast is going to have some titles. I feel like we're at the logical conclusion of Von Trier,
I think so.
Which has no logical conclusion.
Correct.
Therefore, we'll end now.
Cheers.
The titles we're going to see are...
First on deck, we have Creed 2. We have When Jeff Tried to Save the World. Do you want to talk a little bit about that title?
It's got John Heder. It's got Gary Gergich, or Jerry Gergich, depending on how you know him, from Parks and Recreation. And it's currently in the festival circuit. I think by the time we release the podcast about it, it will be out for digital download in digital release, and perhaps still at a smaller venue theater within LA. I'm not sure. I'll have to check.
Awesome. And if we have time to catch it, we will do Roma. If not, we'll talk about The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. And lastly, a Netflix title called The World Is Yours by Romain Gavras,
which anyone can watch on Netflix in America, at least.
There you go. Until next week.
Let's finish this winter ale, huh?
Let's do it.
Run! Go! Get to the chopper!
We have to go.
I'm coming with you.
That was brilliant.
And scene.
Scene. Mice and scene? The mice are in the scene!